Before you read another word, answer this honestly. If you found out right now that the biggest tech story of the decade was quietly losing to a topic people have been mocking for 70 years, would you believe the data, or would you assume the data was lying to you? Because that's the exact question that kept one person awake for 3 straight weeks in the summer of 2026. And by the time you finish this, you're going to understand why the honest answer terrified her more than any conspiracy theory ever could. It's 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in July, and you're sitting in front of 2 monitors that have been glowing for 6 straight hours. You run analytics for a mid-sized media network, the kind of job where nobody outside your department knows your name, but everyone reads your reports before they make million-dollar decisions. Your coffee went cold 2 hours ago. You haven't noticed. You're staring at a number that shouldn't exist, and the small, stubborn part of your brain that still trusts spreadsheets more than people is asking the same question over and over. Did you mess up the formula? You didn't. You've checked it 4 times, then a 5th, just to be sure your own exhaustion wasn't lying to you. 7 videos, 1 category, 3.57 million combined views, and an engagement rate sitting so far above every AI explainer channel tracked in the same window that your first instinct isn't excitement, it's suspicion. Something built on 20 years of watching data behave predictably is telling you, quietly, that predictable just broke, and you don't yet know if that's a discovery or a mistake with your name on it. Here's the thing nobody tells you about this job. You don't get paid to be curious. You get paid to be right, on time, in a format your boss can skim in 90 seconds before a 9 a.m. meeting. Curiosity is the thing you're supposed to leave at the door when you clock in. But you don't leave it there tonight. You pull the raw watch time data instead, and that's when the first real crack shows up, not in the total views, but in the shape of the curve itself. Novelty spikes decay. Every media trend you've ever tracked, every viral moment you've ever built a slide deck around, follows the same tired arc. A sharp rise, a peak within days, a slow bleed back to nothing within 2 weeks. You've built entire quarterly reports around that shape. It's gospel in your line of work. It's the one law that's never broken. Except this curve doesn't decay. It holds. 3 separate release dates, May 8th, May 22nd, June 12th, and instead of 3 fading spikes collapsing one after another, you're looking at 3 plateaus stacked on top of each other like stairs going somewhere you can't see the top of yet. You lean back in your chair and just breathe for a second, because part of you already knows, if you're right about this, you're about to spend the next several weeks fighting people who don't want to hear it. You almost don't send the report. That's the part you'll think about later, the part that gnaws at you at 2 in the morning for entirely different reasons than tonight. You almost don't send it, because you already know exactly how it's going to land in that building. Your network's entire growth strategy for the next fiscal year is built around AI content, sponsorships already signed, editorial calendars already locked 6 months out, a whole department hired specifically to chase that one wave and nothing else. And here you are at midnight holding a chart that quietly says, you bet on the wrong horse, and a fringe topic from the 1950s just walked past everyone while nobody was looking. You tell yourself it's because the data doesn't lie. Some smaller, more honest part of you knows it's because you can't not know why. That's always been your problem. The thing that's cost you relationships, and sleep, and once, almost a job. Once a number stops behaving the way it's supposed to, you can't rest until you understand exactly why it broke the rules. For 11 days, nothing happens. The report sits in a shared folder, unread, a little icon showing 0 views next to your name, and you start doing the thing people do when they've been ignored long enough. You go looking for reasons to doubt yourself before someone else finds them first. Maybe it's a bot farm. Maybe it's a coordinated push from a handful of accounts, the kind of manufactured spike that inflates numbers for exactly as long as someone's paying to keep it inflated, then vanishes without a trace. You spend 3 nights trying to actively disprove your own finding. Cross-referencing IP distribution, comment authenticity, watch time consistency across every device type you can pull data for, and every single test comes back clean. Real people. Real minutes watched, not skipped through. Real comments, long ones, the kind people write at midnight when they're actually thinking something through, not just farming engagement for an algorithm they don't understand. You start reading them instead of sleeping, and somewhere around comment 400, you notice something that makes the hair on your arms actually stand up. People aren't just watching these 7 videos once. They're returning to them. Rewatching specific timestamps, pausing, screenshotting. debating each other in threads that run 6, 7, 8 replies deep, about a Pentagon memo, about a single percentage, 40% unresolved. Someone keeps quoting it like it's scripture, like it's the only sentence in the entire internet worth arguing about tonight. Nobody debates an AI product demo like that. Nobody goes back to rewatch a chip announcement 3 separate times looking for something they missed. Here's where it stops being a work problem and starts being something closer to obsession. You find the name of the analyst attached to one of the 7 videos, a small channel, nothing flashy, run by someone who's apparently been covering this exact government office since 2022, long before it was profitable, back when doing so actively hurt monetization under the platform's old guidelines. You reach out on a whim, half expecting silence. You don't expect a reply at all. You get one in 4 hours, and it's longer than you expected, and it says something that rearranges the entire shape of what you thought you were investigating. It's not the topic, they tell you, typing fast, like they've been waiting years for someone to finally ask the right question. It's the labor. Every one of these government releases doesn't arrive as a clean press statement you can summarize in an afternoon. It arrives as raw case files, cross-referenced radar logs, FBI interview transcripts, dozens of dense pages per case, written in language built for investigators, not audiences. Almost nobody's willing to actually read it properly before hitting record. You could turn around 4 polished AI videos in the time it takes to responsibly verify one of these files against its primary source. That's not a content strategy anyone chose on purpose. That's a bottleneck nobody built, sitting quietly in the exact center of the biggest content opportunity you've seen in your entire career, and you're one of maybe a dozen people on Earth who currently understands why it exists. You tell yourself you're done after this conversation. Just confirm it, write the follow-up, move on with your life, sleep like a normal person again. But by the 3rd week, you're not sleeping right regardless, and it's not because you're scared of anything supernatural in those files. It's because you keep running the numbers forward, further out, into September, into the fall, and they keep pointing somewhere your network isn't structurally prepared for. You start drafting a second report, bigger this time, the kind with your actual name printed on the cover page instead of buried 3 lines down in a footer nobody reads. You know exactly what it will cost you if you're wrong in front of the wrong people. You know exactly what it will cost you if you're right, and nobody in that room decides to listen anyway. Somewhere in that uncomfortable in-between space, staring at your own tired reflection in a dark monitor at 2 in the morning, you understand something you don't love admitting to yourself. You're not just tracking a trend anymore. You've become invested in it being real, the specific, slightly dangerous way people get invested in things that finally make them feel like they saw something first, before anyone else in the room even knew to look. Your manager calls you into her office on a Monday, and for one long, cold second, you think you're being let go for wasting 3 weeks on a hunch nobody asked for. She doesn't say that. She says the follow-up report finally got forwarded, that people upstairs are curious, and that you have exactly 1 shot, 1 internal meeting, to make your case before the quarter's content budget locks for good. You spend that entire weekend rebuilding your slides from scratch, cutting anything that sounds like belief, and keeping only what sounds like proof, because you already know the room you're about to walk into, and you know exactly which sentence will get you laughed out of it if you say it wrong. The meeting happens on a Thursday. You walk in with 11 slides and a printed 1-pager nobody asked for, because some old, stubborn instinct tells you paper feels more permanent than a screen someone can simply close on you mid-sentence. You get 4 minutes before someone checks their phone under the table. You get through slide 6 before the first real objection lands, supply-side noise, they call it, ordinary competition dynamics, nothing structural, nothing worth reshaping a quarterly strategy around. You've heard this exact argument in your own head 100 times over the last 3 weeks, quietly, at 2 in the morning, and for one dangerous second, standing there in front of everyone, you almost believe it too. Then you say the one thing you'd promised yourself you wouldn't lead with, because it sounds too much like belief instead of analysis, too much like faith dressed up as data. This isn't a spike. It's the first time in this platform's entire recorded history this specific combination has ever occurred. Nobody says anything for a long moment. You don't know, standing frozen in that room, whether that silence is the sound of people finally, actually listening to you, or the sound of people quietly deciding you've spent too many nights alone with a spreadsheet, and it's finally caught up with you where everyone can see it. You never fully find out which one it was, not that day. That's the part that stays with you longest, longer than the data itself, longer than the argument, longer than the cold coffee and the 4 a.m. spreadsheets. Somebody eventually greenlights a small pilot, 3 videos, a modest budget nobody's proud of yet, no name attached publicly except yours quietly listed in the internal memo nobody outside the department will ever read. Whether it actually works, whether the curve keeps holding through the fall, or finally does what every curve you've ever tracked eventually does and comes back down to earth exactly the way the textbooks say it should, isn't something you get to know yet, sitting here at the end of this story. You just know that somewhere between that first sleepless Tuesday night and this one, the question stopped being about a category on a dashboard and quietly became something closer to whether you were willing to trust a number you couldn't fully explain, long enough and loudly enough to find out whether it was actually telling you the truth. Maybe that's the real story sitting underneath all these numbers, the one that has nothing to do with orbs in the sky or Pentagon memos or any government portal at all. It's not really that a fringe topic from the 1950s quietly beat $1 trillion industry for a few weeks in the summer of 2026. It's that somewhere inside a building full of smart, careful people paid specifically to predict what happens next, one exhausted analyst looked at a number that flatly refused to behave the way every number before it had always behaved, and instead of closing the laptop, deleting the file, and going back to sleep like anyone reasonable would have, she kept watching. She kept asking the one question her job never actually paid her to ask. And whatever happens to that pilot program by the time this quarter ends, that decision, hers alone, at midnight, already changed something that isn't showing up in any spreadsheet yet. If this pulled you in the way it pulled her in at 11:47 that Tuesday night, subscribe, because the next file drop is already scheduled, and I'll be tracking exactly what happens to that curve when it lands. And tell me in the comments, if you were sitting in that room on Thursday, watching her say it out loud, would you have believed her, or would you have been the one checking your phone under the table?